And still poor visibility on some of the higher routes, especially as that rain band then by the end of Friday spreads into northern England and Northern Ireland. Behind it, it may well turn brighter during Friday afternoon. Still pretty mild here as well, and still fairly cold further north, and that contrast for the next few days will continue. But the milder air will win out further north as we head into the Christmas period, before perhaps turning colder as we head towards Boxing Day. Bye for now.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tens of thousands of ambulance workers are striking today. If people die, whose fault is it? Is it the ambulance workers, the unions, or is it the government? That's our moral debate this evening. We'll have a look at Suella Braverman contemplating using old cruise ships to house Channel migrants. Is it really going to happen? And Andrew Maguire joins me on Talking Pints. Our money used to be backed by gold. It hasn't been for the last 50 years. What has that meant for our money? And what will happen now to the price of gold? All of that coming up in a moment. First, though, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you, and good evening to you. Ambulance unions have been reacting angrily after the government accused them of making a conscious choice to harm patients by going out on strike.
What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? When?
Well, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, claims unions are refusing to work with the government at a national level on how paramedics will cover emergency calls during strike action. The Unite union says the Health Secretary's comments are a blatant lie. The GMB union describes it as insulting, and Unison's General Secretary says Mr Barclay is refusing to even discuss pay.
We sit down in a room, you have a bit of give and take on both sides. But I'm getting nothing from him or from this government. All they're saying to me is, we can't negotiate about pay. And where does that leave us? One of the reasons the ambulance service, the NHS, is in such a dire state is because they haven't invested in the workforce. So people leave. Those who are left are under increasing pressure. These people don't get meal breaks. They hardly get a day off. They work excessive overtime because it's the only way the service can run.
Christina McAnay, but the Health Secretary maintains the government is trying to work constructively with the unions.
clearly we will need to look at the data from today to see whether the exemptions that the trade unions have promised materialise. They've said on the one hand they want to cause maximum disruption, but on the other hand that they don't want to cause harm to patients. So we've tried to work constructively with the trade unions, but of course if we see significant patient harm, then as a government we will need to look at what is done in terms of minimum service levels.
A man who admitted murdering his pregnant partner and 3 children in Derbyshire will spend the rest of his life in jail. Damien Bendall was given a whole life order for killing Terry Harris, her children Lacey and John Paul Bennett, and Lacey's friend Connie Gent in Killamarsh in September last year. The prosecutor told the court they were brutal, vicious attacks. International news, and Ukraine's president has arrived in Washington in the United States for talks with Joe Biden, his first foreign trip since the start of Russia's invasion. Volodymyr Zelensky will also address Congress and hold a number of bilateral meetings to help strengthen Ukrainian resilience and defence capabilities. Earlier this week, the US confirmed a new package of military aid for the country worth £1.6 billion, including a Patriot missile system to help Ukraine defend its infrastructure against Russian attacks. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, today it's ambulance strikes. Tens of thousands of ambulance workers, paramedics and indeed call handlers are on strike across the country today. There are some areas that have not gone on strike, but the vast majority have. And the Army have been filling in as best they possibly can, but a very difficult job to do. You know, even before these strikes, I bet there's not a single one of you that hasn't heard a story, that has not heard a story over the course of the last year or so, where they've been somewhat horrified by the sheer amount of time it's taken for an ambulance to come. It is part of broken Britain. It's not working in the way that it used to. We're going to cut. I'm going to stop. We're going to cut live to the White House, to President Biden and Ukraine's Zelensky. OK, so this is the first visit that Volodymyr Zelensky has made since the invasion last February of Ukraine. He's there at the White House with Joe Biden. And Biden, very much, although I think to be fair, whether you agree with the policy or not, it was Boris Johnson that led the way in terms of Western support for Ukraine. But Biden has gone along with that. So this is a very significant moment. As I've said to you before on this show, you know, all this media telling you that the Ukrainians are winning the war, the Russians have withdrawn, well, I'd be very, very careful and cautious about all of that. The fact they've fallen back behind, the Russians have fallen back behind their defensive position, does not mean the Russians are beaten. And it may well be that the Ukrainians are in for a very long, dark, cold, hungry winter without power and possibly even without enough water too. So we will, as the evening goes on, follow that meeting and go live, cut live at any moment to a press conference that may happen. Back to strikes. So things are wrong within the ambulance service. It's not been working. It is part of broken Britain. I was a bit shocked, really, to hear the junior Minister, for Health, Will Quince, telling us, don't leave your house, don't do anything dangerous. Well, I almost thought, gosh, they're putting another lockdown on us. But it was the comments, I think, of the Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, that really have sparked a bit of public debate. He says the ambulance workers are making a conscious choice to inflict harm on the British people. So are we back to 1980s style wars between trade unions and Conservative ministers? And if people die today, where does the fault lie? It's a big moral question. This isn't just about a factory closing down with a row over pay disputes and what may happen to productivity. This really is about people's lives. Earlier on today, GB News were out at Waterloo talking to striking ambulance workers.
Not trying to put people's lives at risk. We're trying to make sure that people are looked after properly. If you desperately need an ambulance, call an ambulance, and if the service can't provide it, we will go from the picket line.
This is happening every day. People are dying because we haven't got the resources to send, we haven't got the nurses to give the care in the hospital. So it's not just about today, it's about what's been happening for weeks and years. People need to start listening to us in government.
Blame is firmly at the door of the government. We've heard reports again this week of patients dying because we haven't been able to turn out ambulance quick enough to them. We haven't got sufficient resources available to us and available to the public to keep them safe on a daily basis. This is as best that we can do. Our crews are run ragged. They are absolutely at breaking point, as are all of the services across the NHS. And there's nothing else left for us to do but to take action.
Now, I understand, you know, some of those workers there, and of course, we're talking to strikers, so of course they're going to take an anti-government position. But it was interesting, wasn't it? The woman in the middle there who said this isn't just about today, it's about what's happening to the ambulance service, and I do give credence to that. However, these people are involved in a vital public service. I'm not sure being insulted by a Conservative Secretary for Health actually helps. But if people die today, whose fault is it? Well, I'm afraid to say, ultimately, I don't think people like ambulance workers should go out on strike, whatever their grievances may be. That is my view. You give me your view, please. Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, joining me to debate this is somebody who was around in the 1980s when he was Mayor of London, actually, and he was a very busy man. Ken Livingstone, pleasure to see you. Is this back to the future? Is this a Tory government?
Well, look, this last 12 years under this government, we've seen public spending cut more than at any time in my lifetime. I mean, you go back, Tory Prime Ministers in the 60s and 70s wouldn't have been cutting back on NHS spending. But under this government, in 12 years, they're now spending 18% less on the NHS than if they carried on with Labour spending.
That is just not true.
It is true.
No, hang on, hear me through. You know, we are now spending 12% of GDP on the health sector, all right? 10 years ago, 11 years ago, we were spending 8%. It's not a lack of money, is it?
It is a lack of money. We've got thousands of job, I mean, 60,000 nurses vacancies and things like that. This government, only this last 12 years, has made cuts in public spending, not just the NHS, that no Tory government in the decades before would have dared to do. And I think, this is appalling. I totally support those workers going on strike, because in real terms, their pay in the last decade has come down by almost up to 20%.
I may sympathise with you on the pay.
Don't forget, we're the 6th richest nation in the world. We don't have to treat people
I
like
have
this.
some sympathy with you on the pay issue, and I said so last night about the nurses, although to ask for 19%, I thought in their case was unreasonable, but equally the government needs to give more in this negotiation. So I do have some sympathy on the pay. However, if you are involved in a vital public service where the immediacy of people's life is concerned, is it right to go on strike?
Of course, it's a bloody nightmare. But what else have they got to do? This government's been squeezing their pay year by year by year, and it's triggered this strike. This strike isn't because the workers want to go on strike, because they've got no choice now. I mean, lots of them aren't able to pay their rent. I mean, literally, in my lifetime, there's never been a government as bad as this. It's made cuts that no previous Tory government, Edward Heath, wouldn't have done this.
I remember Ken Livingstone in the 1980s saying similar things about the Thatcher government.
Well, but she wouldn't have made cuts in the NHS. I mean, she did some pretty terrible things, like abolishing my council.
Well, I mean, some of us thought it was about, but you came back. But no, I mean, I'm going to repeat the point. We're putting more money into health than we ever did before. It may not have found its way into nurses' pockets or ambulance drivers' pockets.
But it's not keeping up with the need. This is the thing. I mean, literally, you look at Britain, we're getting older. More and more Brits are getting to be over 60, over 75. And, of course, immediately when you're my age, you have more health problems than you do when you're 45.
And mass immigration has led to our population exploding as well.
Well, yeah, but if we weren't doing that mass immigration, there'd be even more vacancies. I mean, we've got surgeons coming from Africa and Latin America to work here.
Final thought, if people die today directly as a result of this ambulance strike, whose fault is it?
This government.
All right, Ken Livingstone.
Cheers.
As robust as ever. But then that wouldn't surprise me at all. Now, Mary Dejevsky is also not exactly a right-winger. She joins me down the line now from Sicily, and she's, columnist on The Independent, writes in The Spectator. And Mary, I read what you'd, said last week about nurses, and the point I think you were making is there are many other people working in refuse collection or other areas of public services who equally do important jobs but aren't going on strike. Am I right to interpret that?
Yes, that's certainly one of the big points that I was trying to make. And I have to say that I find that the government has a case here, or at least I think it does, and I think it's not making it at all well. I don't know whether it's reticent to make it, whether it doesn't really believe in its case, but it has a case, and I don't think it's making it.
Do you think when the Health Secretary, Stephen Barclay, says that ambulance workers are making a conscious choice to harm people, is language like that useful when it comes to settling a dispute?
Well, it's obviously not useful, just as it's not useful to advise people just before Christmas that really going out and getting drunk is an irresponsible thing to do because they might have to call an ambulance. None of these things are very helpful. But the temperature has risen to the point where there are those emotions on either side. And one thing that I find very difficult to understand is why, after all these years, it's still the government that NHS workers, whether they're nurses, doctors, or ambulance people, that it's the government that they want to talk to, and they feel neglected because the government sort of won't immediately drop everything and talk to them on their terms. I don't understand why that should be. Why should they not be talking to NHS management? They seem to think they've got a sort of privileged hotline to the government, and they deserve to be spoken to by the government.
I agree with that. I have to say, I thought Stephen Barclay's comments that he would talk to the Royal College of Nursing, for example, but not about the issue they were striking on, namely pay, but other things. I thought that was wrong. So when we look at what's going on today, we will no doubt, there'll be stories in the tabloid press tomorrow of horrific wait times for ambulances, although we've had those, I'm afraid to say, pre-strike over the last year or two before. OK, I get it. You're analysing this. We've got two entrenched sides, no proper negotiations. Whose fault is it? Is it a bit of both if people die today, or do we apportion blame more to one side or the other?
I apportion blame much more to the people who are on strike. The people on strike, whether they're nurses or ambulance people, they are not a majority. More people are working than not working. I think that there should be legislation that limits the effect of strikes in what are essential public services. That includes transport, it includes nurses, it includes ambulance drivers. Those sort of regulations exist on the continent, they exist in places like France. I don't see why they shouldn't pertain in the UK as well.
Mary Dejevsky, thank you very much indeed for putting that robust point of view. And I have to say, in conclusion, whilst I feel absolutely for people on relatively low pay at a time of rising inflation, the logic of what you say for a country that needs to continue to exist as a civilised society, I think the logic is absolutely on your side. Thank you for joining me this evening on GB News. Well, both sides of the argument put there. I hope you feel at home and in your cars listening on radio. We've done that as fairly as we possibly can. But this action that's been taken by ambulance workers is by no means unanimous. There are many people out there in that service who are working today. We need resolution. The government needs to be a bit more reasonable, I think, with all of these people. But still, I don't believe they should be on strike, and I really, really don't. Today, Home Secretary Suella Braverman discussed the possibility of putting cross-channel migrants on old, empty cruise ships. Is it feasible? Is it possible? We'll debate that in just a moment.
Join me, Calvin Robinson, on Christmas Eve and Day to explore how this special period has become a source of hope with an especially festive show. Expect Christmas carols, nativity readings, and interviews with special guests. And it's all filmed in a church for that proper Christmas feeling. Christmas, a message of hope at 2 p.m. on Christmas Eve and 5 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Christmas Day. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
So, if people die today, whose fault is it? Was the question that I asked you to respond to, and of course you have in great numbers. David has said all sides, unions, NHS management and government. Steve says both are to blame in different areas. Specifying those areas as important. It's not just black and white. Another viewer says, their fault, the NHS, and I guess you're lumping in the ambulance workers with that as well. And finally, all I've got time to take, John says, they're all to blame. This is an utter mess, and it's the public who have to pay the price. Well, look, you know, I've laid out my position on this for the last 2 nights. I don't think the government are being reasonable, and I think that's stupid, because I think if they were reasonable, they would very much get the vast majority of the public on their side. Some of the demands that are being made by the unions are wholly unrealistic. I sympathise with people on an individual basis, but I really don't think people working in areas like ambulance care should go on strike. That's my view. No doubt we're going to return to that over the course of the next few weeks. Now today, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, she was appearing before a committee in Parliament, just as Parliament begins to wind down for the recess, and Of course, inevitably, we were talking about the cross-channel migrant problem, 45,000 people, just over, that have crossed this year. Unlikely, looking at the weather, that any more will come between now and the end of the year. But she was talking about the possibility of using cruise ships, old cruise ships, to house migrants. So I guess the idea would be the boats would get to our 12-mile line, people would be offloaded onto those cruise liners for processing. She discussed it as being a possibility. But is it actually ever really going to happen? Well, let me ask former Home Office advisor and serving Conservative councillor in Kent, Claire Purcell. Claire, I mean, I keep hearing this, flights to Rwanda, now we've got cruise ships in the English Channel, and all I actually see now are over 400 hotels that have been filled up during the course of a Conservative government in this country, talks of pontins at Camber Sands and butlins around the country. Is this plan that was discussed today feasible, or was she just, pardon the pun, floating the idea of cruise ships?
No, it isn't feasible. Let's all be honest with it. Where are you going to get these cruise ships from, for a start? How much money is that going to cost? If you just look at the practicalities of cruise ships, they can take 4,000 people if you're going to really put them in. Well, as you've just said, 45,000 have come across the Channel so far this year. So how many cruise ships are you going to have? Where are you going to put them? How are you staffing them? It's one of these policies, yet again, that has just been put out there because they feel it is the right thing to say, with absolutely nothing to back it up.
Well, you're a serving Conservative councillor. You know, we've had Priti Patel, who I personally like very much indeed, but Priti Patel over-promising, under-delivering. We got Suella, and my political highlight of the year, by the way, in this rather grim year, was her in the leadership contest, you know, saying live to camera, we're going to have to leave ECHR. I'm thinking, whoa, at last someone gets it, but now she's Home Secretary. That's not even on the agenda in a Sunak government, and he was asked about this yesterday, completely dodged the question. What does all of this mean for the Conservatives' prospects?
It's not good. I think you and I will both...
Not good?
That's probably as nice as I can be right now, because I'm facing re-election next year, and I can see that this is going to be a really tough battle. Everything I believe in as a Conservative is being flushed away currently, and as you've just said, we were looking to something more positive with the leadership contest, and it hasn't happened. You know, this is going to put the Conservatives back at least a decade. And what I worry about is people are going to go away from the Conservative Party, they're going to say, we're going to vote Labour, whatever. And the options aren't any better, especially if you look at immigration. You want to look at what Labour are saying on what they would do, because it isn't going to help. It's not what people want. So I think that the voting public are going to be really cautious when it comes to the ballot boxes when the next general election comes. But I think at local election time, they are going to punish the Conservative Party for things that are out of local councillors' control.
Now, there are thousands of seats up for election in May of next year, and it's up to 7,000 seats being contested right across the United Kingdom. I mean, can we face the scenario where Rishi Sunak's Conservatives do badly and there's another leadership challenge? or do you see him now as the settled leader?
I see him now as a settled leader. I think the Conservative Party would be very, very stupid to think they can depose another leader so quickly. I think this is now his to own until the next general election. It is going to be very, very painful, and the onus is now on the party to get this right. Whether they do that or not remains to be seen.
I mean, that Brexit vote, come on, that Brexit vote, that Midlands and north of England, the Red Wall, UKIP voters, Brexit Party voters, Brexit voters, 75% of whom voted for Boris Johnson's Conservatives in 2019. Unless you solve this cross-channel thing, they're gone, aren't they?
I think they are, but I think what's also interesting is to where they go. I'm not sure that they would revert back to Labour. I think perhaps smaller parties do have a chance to take over some seats in those red wall areas. Labour aren't going to give them the option. At the current time, Conservatives are struggling. So I think that's probably a slightly more interesting way of looking at it. But you are absolutely right. With this crisis at the moment, if the Conservatives don't get it right, they are gone at the next election.
And where's the opposition? You know, it seems to me that the Eurosceptics who had gone from being the fringe to being in control are back to being a fringe. It seems, I talked to you tonight, and I talked to other Conservatives who feel in despair, over the taking back control pledge with Brexit and where we are today. Have you guys just given up effectively?
The majority of us haven't, and that's what I find really hard. If you talk to local councillors, if you talk to the majority of MPs in Parliament, Conservative MPs, they absolutely haven't given up. It just feels that the Cabinet itself has closed the doors to any kind of conversation going on. Brexit is one of those things we have to get right. Absolutely. I was out there campaigning for it, as were you. I want to see it done. So does the 17 million people that voted for it.
But there's been a globalist coup, hasn't there? I mean, Hunt was put in, Sunak's been put in, our first ever Goldman Sachs Prime Minister. I mean, the globalists are now running the Conservatives. Mass immigration, be it legal or illegal, seems to be what they want.
Unfortunately, it feels very much like that. And what I want to see are other voices coming through. Unfortunately, the Cabinet is not made up of people that I would have had in there who would actively question and debate the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. There isn't enough of that. And unfortunately, every Prime Minister does it, surrounds himself by people that are going to say yes. And that is always a mistake.
I have to say, I think you're onto a loser. But I could be wrong. You must come back here after the May elections and we'll analyse what has happened to local Conservative councillors up and down the country. It's a big moment coming up in May. It's interesting. National media always underestimates the importance every year of these rounds of local elections. 2023 is a really big one. In a minute, we'll come back and talk about, it's almost unbelievable, but the collusion between the FBI and Twitter to suppress debate about Hunter Biden and other things. All of that in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints, but over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At this moment, I want to give you some really good Brexit news. Yes, no, I really do. The government are really shouting from the rooftops to anyone that will listen that we've got some great news for our fishing industry. Yes, absolutely. Fisheries Minister Spencer's telling us we now, next year for 2023, have a further 30,000 tonnes of fish we can land each year commercially, sell in market. And that's really good news. And it shows that Brexit is working for fisheries. That's the government line. Well, if you live in the northeast of England, there is no increase in quota whatsoever. And all those boats that I see so regularly in the English Channel, fishing right up to our 6-mile line, not the 12-mile line that should be our absolute minimum under international law, but no, fishing right up to the 6-mile line. In fact, more French, Dutch, Belgian boats fishing on the 6-mile line than most people on the south coast of England have ever seen before. We still have vast factory ships, hard working in the English Channel, some of them catching as much as 150 tonnes a day of mackerel or herrings or sardines or whatever else it may be. And how extraordinary that this announcement about the good news for fishing comes just as the annual European Union Council meeting on fisheries quotas has ended. So here it is, Brexit Britain, where we voted to take back our fishing industry, to take back our territorial waters. How extraordinary that the reason we've got a further 30,000 tonnes we can catch this year is because the European Union have agreed to it. That is not what I campaigned for. It is not what our coastal communities voted for. It is not what the country deserves and expects. Is it any wonder that when the British public are polled today on whether they think Brexit was a good thing or a bad thing, a growing number think it was a bad thing, not because it was, but because of what the Conservatives have done with it. Now, Elon Musk is incredibly busy with Twitter, all sorts of Twitter polls now asking him not to continue as CEO. It is quite remarkable. But I'm going to cut now live to the White House, to President Biden and Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine.
So difficult. You know, if I'm calm, I came in that we control the situation and because of support. And first of all, because of your support, and I understand that we have very important topics and we'll discuss them, everything, so many challenges in Ukraine, in Europe, in the world.
Okay. Well, that was the Oval Office. That was the Oval Office, and it is, as I've said already, it is a significant meeting that is taking place. But I will go back. I will go back to where I was, because I was talking about America. I was talking about Elon Musk. I was talking about the Twitter files. And what was revealed last night on the Twitter files, I find this hard to believe, is that the FBI gave $3.5 million to Twitter for them to suppress certain pieces of information. Now, I don't want to get into this deep state conspiracy theory, but then when I look at the facts laid bare before me of what actually happened in the run-up to that election in November 2020, it would appear that much of mainstream media, of social media, and arms of government, like the FBI, did all they could to suppress what had happened, what was seen on that laptop from Hunter Biden. I don't go along with claims about a stolen election, but I do think what America went through last time was not a free and a fair and an open election. And frankly, in my view, that whole thing is a complete disgrace. Now, Joe Lycett, the comedian, we've talked about him over the last few weeks, and he's really quite sparky and quite fun. And if you remember, just a few weeks ago, as the World Cup started, he was shredding 10 grand's worth of money. It was all a very big, dramatic gesture. It was his protest that we were going out to Qatar to play the World Cup. His protest that, you know, some stars were going out there and taking money. And in particular, you know, what he was aiming at, of course, was David Beckham, who was going out there as an administrator. So he shredded 10 grand's worth of money. It was a big, dramatic gesture, huge sensation on social media. Turned out, actually, it was fake money that he shredded and it wasn't his. And now it turns out that in 2015, he himself went out to the Middle East and did some paid gigs. This was revealed in The Sun. There's now a war of words between Joe Lycett and The Sun. But you know, the moral of the story is very, very simple. People in glass houses should not throw stones. In a moment, I'll be joined by former commodity trader Andrew Maguire. He spent his life specialising in gold and silver and precious metals. We'll talk about how our money used to be backed by gold, but it isn't any longer. Why that matters, what the impact of that's been on our lives, and what happens to gold from here on.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's time for Talking Pints. It really, really is. And my guest tonight, Andrew Maguire, is a former commodities trader. So we've sort of come from very similar backgrounds. Now, Andrew, your obsession with precious metals began as a teenager.
It certainly did. In fact, at 12 years old, I used to go to auctions and literally buy any old scrapped piece of silver. And of course, you know, collected all this stuff. And the family thought it was crazy. But actually, you know what? It turned out to be a really, really good investment. and I've loved... Silver's been something, a passion I've had for silver for many, many years. It's always been a currency throughout history.
Sterling,
absolutely.
You know, sterling, yeah.
And a benchmark. And it used to be a benchmark for the pound. And of course then, yes, but that evolved to gold, of course. And the gold and silver are joined at the hip, so to speak. And of course, gold is viewed really by governments, central banks as an asset.
Well, we're going to talk about the history of gold in a moment. I mean, I got involved with silver as a teenager. I think I was 16, 17. When I first got involved, I worked on the London Metal Exchange. You were a bullion dealer. So our background's very, very similar. But it's important to explain to people just how important gold was. It was the same thing as money up until 1971. Just give us a quick take on that.
Yep, up until 1971. It really, gold... basically it created a discipline. It created a discipline on governments where you couldn't just create money. It would be, you know, your money was backed by gold.
Yep.
Now, if we go all the way back to, if I was in 1200 and I was in Warwick Castle and I wanted to invade the castle in Kenilworth, I would go down to my to the vaults and I would count how many gold coins I had, because that is the limit as to whether I could actually go to war or not. Or in fact, if I did run out, they may pay them to come back on me. So basically, gold has always been, it provided discipline to...
But then President Nixon
broke
the link between the dollar and gold, which, as I see it, allowed governments to create what we call fiat money, allowed governments to start creating money, which has led to, well, not for the whole of the time, but a long period of inflation, a long period of monetary devaluation, which we're back into again today.
Absolutely full circle. And I think what happened was the minute that he depegged gold, the gold from the dollar, essentially, as you say, fiat currencies. What is a fiat currency? People know it is simply the pound or the dollar that you hold in your hand. What is it backed by? It's backed by faith in the government.
Confidence, that's what they tell us.
Absolutely. So do you have, this is the question I ask people, do you have confidence in this £20 note?
See, I'm told by the Bank of England that all cryptocurrencies are utterly valueless, but then I look at the existing money and I begin to ask, not quite the same, but similar questions. Andrew, you worked in this market, buying and selling gold.
Yep.
Governments, even though money is not pegged directly to gold, governments hold reserves of gold.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a chancellor who took over in 1997, the great Gordon Brown, who told us that gold was a barbarous relic, that its time had gone, and then proceeded to sell 400 metric tons of our gold reserves in the Bank of England at an average price of about $270 an ounce, and it's now $1,800 an ounce. What was he thinking?
Yeah, well, in pound terms, it's £1,450, so $1,800 in dollars, of course. So apples to apples. What was he thinking is absolutely right, and I think really at that point there, what it really sent us down a road of money printing and debasement, currency debasement, and I think so. Really, gold is, as you've just started out by saying, gold is money. Everything else is credit. Everything else is really, and then we're talking about debt-based systems here. We're talking about how is in, I mean, if you have your £20 note and you put it into the bank, number one, you've just loaned that to the bank. People don't realise that, but that actually is, it is in your name.
Yeah.
But, and they can fractionalise that and lend it out. But the thing is, it's depreciating. And what's the current rate of inflation in this country? 10% they claim? Actually, if you go down the grocery store, I don't think it's 10%. It's more like 20. And most people will just say, well, look at my basket has not cost me just 10% more. So really, when people say to me, well, look, yes, well, I've got cash in the bank. It's a bit of a risky environment right now. We're talking about governments.
And money's safe.
But
money's devaluing. I know. And that's going to catch up with people as it did in the 70s.
Yeah.
But within the gold market and within this relationship with central banks, with governments, with the markets, I mean, you've been a bit of a whistleblower. You believe there's great corruption that exists there.
We've proved it, Nigel. And back in 2008, I uncovered a scheme by our too big to fail banks had colluded, and it was called a conspiracy theory at the time, had colluded to rig the price of precious metal. Now we're talking about a market, and believe it or not, if you add in all of the paper derivatives that surround a piece of physical gold, you're talking about literally 70 trillion. I mean, a trillion, forget it. I'm sorry, guys, because I can't even imagine it. But anyway, you're talking about a market that is that big. So basically what happened was we uncovered a scheme where they would set the price of gold at the fixed point. There's a certain point in the day where you fix the price of gold.
In the morning in London, the official
London,
fix. Yep.
11 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning in London, and 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Now, the whole world, the whole globe, fixes their gold price to that price. Yep. Central banks do, bullion dealers, everyone across the world. And you're talking about a massive market here, as big as oil. So, essentially, if you can rig that price, and it's a bit like saying, this horse is going to win this race.
Very useful.
Absolutely, very useful. So really, it's a no-brainer that you will actually make money. So what I did was uncover this scheme, which we then reported it to the CFTC, which is the Commodity Futures Trading regulators. We reported it to the Department of Justice in America. Subsequently, we reported it to Andrew Bailey when he was head of the FCA. Of the FCA. But essentially, we proved that they were rigging the markets. We gave them 88 examples of where the price would fix the next day. We did that through lawyers so that we would timestamp the day before and say, here's the email, share it with the CFTC, share it with the DOJ, here's where the price of gold would be.
Do you believe there's been a willful attempt
to
keep the price of gold low?
It was a willful attempt to not just keep the price of gold low, but as an insider game to make money.
Yeah, well, corruption can exist in many, many forms. But looking at where we are today, you make the point that, being safe with your money and having it in the bank, and I get the mentality, you're losing 10% a year, or maybe a little bit more at this current moment in time. This programme is not here to give investment advice, and we're not giving investment advice, but I'm asking you, Andrew Maguire, your personal opinion of what you think gold does from here.
Right. So your alternative, stay in cash, put it in the bank, and you lose your 10%. That is an investment decision. You don't think that you get this lovely warm and fuzzy feeling between your ears, it's safe, it's in the bank. No, you are losing 10% minimum. Gold is a 5,000-year-old currency. It has never lost any value. It'll buy you today what it bought 5,000 years ago. And there's so much evidence of that. If you were a Roman legion, you could buy...
The buying power of gold.
The buying power of gold has never eroded. Yeah. In fact, fiat currencies, really, you look at gold as the shore, and fiat currencies as the moving item. So people say, well, but isn't gold the first thing that people say? It has to be addressed. So is gold volatile? Well, if you look at it on a day-to-day basis, yes, every currency, and gold is a commodity, but it's also a currency. It's one of the few, there's only 2 or 4 real commodities that trade on the exchanges as a foreign exchange cross, as if it was pound dollar. It is gold dollar. It's gold pound. It's it trades as a foreign exchange cross. So it is a currency.
So longer term, medium term, not short-term punting for the next 24 hours.
Yeah.
You believe it's the right place to be.
Yeah, so if you just take 2008, take that as a benchmark, and you say, OK, where has gold in pound terms? It's gone 360% higher as of today.
It's been,
the pound is down 39%.
Yeah, if you've been in gold for the last 20 years, it's been a great place to be.
Yeah.
Andrew Maguire, people like him, we used to call gold bugs, and he's a proper gold bug. And I thank you for joining me. With a very short history of gold, but very valuable too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
OK, a few seconds left for Barrage the Farage. Yes, Bobby asks me. There is no love for the nurses, the GPs or the police anymore, let alone the rail staff. The public are sick of strikers. Do you agree? Look, to say there's no love for the nurses is just plain blooming wrong. I think actually there's huge respect for the nurses. Across the sectors, I think the rail unions are completely overplaying their hand and losing public support. But the government can win all of this, provided they're seen to be reasonable. And they seem to be going gratuitously on the offensive. Doesn't make sense to me. Time for one more. Grant asks, if Trump was the UK Prime Minister, how long would it take for him to stop the boats crossing the Channel? Probably about a fortnight, maybe less. And remember that Tony Abbott did do this. Tony Abbott did this in Australia 10 years ago. Time for one more. Yes, absolutely. Laura asks, will you be having turkey on Christmas Day? Andrew, turkey or goose?
It's going to be turkey, my friend.
Going to be turkey. Turkey for me as well, absolutely, with I think a ham on the side. If anyone's vegan watching this, well, don't be offended. It's a free country. We're all allowed to make our own choices, at least we should be, and say what we believe in without being cancelled, which is why GB News exists and why we're here. Now, standing again tonight for Mark Stein, back in Paddington is the one and only Patrick Christys.
Yes, Nigel, cracking show, as always. I would, of course, be having swan for Christmas dinner, if indeed it was legal. But I've got loads coming your way tonight, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm going to be talking about Nicola Sturgeon's trans madness. Why are we housing illegal immigrants instead of UK kids? There's a UK kids homelessness crisis. I'll be talking about all of that and much, much more as well, including the latest climate conspiracy. Make sure you tune in as well. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Get them coming in, people. I will not be holding back as I fill in for the one and the only Mr. Mark Stein. We've had a rip-roaring week so far. Let's crack on, people, eh? Come on.
Good evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A fine day across parts of the north tomorrow with sunny spells, but it is going to be a north-south split, misty, murky conditions across much of the south with rain at times, courtesy of low-pressure systems and weather fronts moving in. This low is still bringing plenty of heavy showers across Scotland, parts of northern England this evening, and tightly packed isobars as well, still very blustery, but the showers will be fading here through the night. We'll keep some going in northern Scotland. Rain moving in once more across parts of southern England. Quite misty, murky conditions here as well. Some foggy conditions, especially on the higher routes. Staying quite mild in the south with clearer spells further north, 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, but most places above freezing to start Thursday. A grey day then across the south tomorrow with rain and drizzle at times. Some of that rain drifting into parts of northern England. For much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, a drier, brighter day. There will still be some showers, chiefly over northern Scotland. And as the northerly winds set in here once more, it's going to turn colder.